Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a new update regarding the potential Alberta 51st state movement. The first thing I want to show, this is going to be a big thing over the next coming month. It is the Canadian election that it's rumored to be happening maybe in a month, maybe on April 20th. You can see this timeline still has it on October 20th. Obviously, it's going to be pushed up before then. We just don't know exactly when it's going to be, but it's been reported that it's going to be April 20th. And you do have Mark Carney, who is a WEF puppet. He's a European Union puppet. He most certainly will try and get Canada into the European Union. He took over for Trudeau in kind of a rigged process. He's right now at a 56% chance. Pierre Poilievre, is at a 44% chance. He obviously, I mean, you take a look at this. He has gone down significantly. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. He could come back. He's really ramping up the anti-immigration rhetoric. He's talking about the fact that Carney endorses possibly doubling Canada's population because they say, well, based on person per land, Canada's population is extremely low. They cannot handle that. You want to talk about doubling your population with third world migrants? They've already destroyed Toronto. It's going to get very bad for the Canadians. Now, Trump has come out and said, well, Carney beating Poilievre is probably better for me just from a negotiation standpoint based off of the conservative perspective. We know Poilievre is running on the whole Canada first thing. And so he's come out against Trump, against the tariffs. Trump doesn't like that. But if you are the conservative, you kind of have to come out against it. I mean, Trump is threatening to annex your entire country and make you a state. Now, is that a real thing or not? Someone finally asked Trump and said, listen, it's probably not a good idea. I think it was Peter Doocy, the Fox News contributor, the press guy. He said, listen, it's very liberal. It's going to be a problem if you make them a state. And then Trump said, well, maybe we'll see. But it makes more sense. And this is why I said, just take Alberta. And then the thought is, at least with some Canadians, they say, listen, the dominoes will fall. It's Alberta, it's Saskatchewan, and then it's Manitoba. And then you have British Columbia isolated. I don't know what you do with them. And then you're talking about possibly negotiating with, at this point, it would be the Eastern Canadian government, mainly Ontario and Quebec, to possibly acquire the three northern territories. They're not provinces, they're territories that are to the east of Alaska. But this is very important for Alberta. If the Liberal Party wins, I think Alberta, the movement is going to ramp up even more, especially if this is happening in a month and it's all going down. You could see them, and under the Canadian law, they can call for a referendum. They can vote to secede from Canada. Quebec did it in the mid-1990s. They were 1% short of becoming independent. But Alberta would have to have it lined up with the United States and with Trump specifically, and really get Trump more honed in on the idea of Alberta specifically, not all of Canada joining the United States. And then we would also expect at least Saskatchewan to join, but it wouldn't really matter. Alberta has so many natural resources and overall power in terms of that with the natural oil and gas. They also do have a pretty nice technological industry there as well. It would be a huge boom for the United States just to take Alberta, and they're conservative, and it's only 5 million people. We're not diluting ourselves in terms of our vote shares if we're taking on just around 5 million people. It's understandable. Even if you take Alberta, Saskatchewan, you're not taking on too many people. My problem is if it becomes a situation to where we have all of Western Canada, now Eastern Canada is destabilized to the point to where they might fracture off, and then it might be a thing where a Liberal gets in power and then all of Canada joins the United States, which you could argue is what Trump wants, but it doesn't make sense because of the way those people vote. They're extremely liberal. Even if they voted conservative, like the moderates in Canada, which are really the left in the United States, it's just how it is in Canada. Everything's more left. A lot of the moderates would be left-wing. Remember, they did a straw poll. Kamala Harris was at 64%. Trump was at 21%. You could say maybe it's 70-30. I've heard of polls now coming out of Alberta talking about them seceding from Canada. It's about 60-40. 60% say no, 40% say yes. I would imagine that would probably change to 60% say yes, 40% say no in a snap reaction if Carney wins and the Liberals win again. So that's why this election is so key. But you also do have this, a billboard in their message here, the separatists behind divisive Let's Join America billboard talking about, listen, they don't think they're needs are being met by the Canadian government, and this is very obvious. It reminds me a lot of the like the greater Idaho, possibly counties in Illinois joining Indiana. It's very clear that Alberta is very conservative, but in terms of their national government level, that doesn't matter. They're just going to be outvoted by the Liberals in the major cities in Canada. So, and by the way, it's a very powerful province based on like per person GDP. Alberta is, because of the natural gas and oil. And by the way, there's certain stipulations to where, because they're so obsessed with green energy, they're restricting the ability for the people in Alberta to really extract the maximum amount of money out of their resources, which is something, especially when you look at Republicans in the United States, that's what we're talking about, regulations, it would not be a big issue. They would be able to probably supercharge their natural gas and oil capabilities if they join the United States. And this would all have to be negotiated. Of course, they wouldn't just leave. They would probably want to have a safety net of joining the US if they wanted to vote to leave. And that would have to be something that would be vocalized by Trump and facilitated by negotiation via the Trump administration and the people and the premier of Alberta. So this would all have to be negotiated through that. But Trump's come out and he says, we want all of Canada. Yeah, we might be liberal a little bit, but the conservative was leading. I mean, listen, it's a lot more liberal than it is in the United States. What we would want is we would want Alberta. We would maybe want Saskatchewan if the Liberal Party and Mark Carney won this Canadian election. And there'd be this snap reaction. And listen, I honestly don't think he will. I think Poilievre will win. It might be a comeback or whatever you want to call it, because right now he's a slight underdog. But I think the other problem might be, and this could be an issue based off of how close the votes might be, the Conservative Party might get the most amount of seats in the Canadian government, but there are two Liberal parties. If they combine for more, it could also be a problem to where both of the Liberal parties usurp the Conservative Party, even though the Conservative gets more than both the Liberal parties. Combine the Liberal parties might get more. You know, it's like the establishment Liberal and then a super left Socialist Party in Canada. So we'll have to see what ends up happening, but the people of Alberta are coming out, and I think a lot of this depends on what happens with this election. If the Conservative Party gets the majority, this probably goes away, I would imagine. Whatever Trump does, he ends up doing. April 2nd is a huge day when it comes to a lot of his tariffs, the reciprocal tariffs. You could argue that, well, this is just Trump possibly getting leverage in the trade renegotiations. And this is something that you can afford to do right now in terms of where we're at in Trump's administration. It's very early on. Tariffs, especially when they're implemented, are not very popular because they destabilize the economy, but they would have hopefully long-term lasting effects for the United States, especially when it comes to us being self-sufficient and more domestic jobs and also domestic production for the US, but it's kind of like ripping a Band-Aid off when you rely on these other countries and they're able to produce things for cheaper. We kind of get accustomed to a certain price, and when that price goes up because now we're producing things domestically and it costs more money, the consumers get very mad. But the overall point of it is we have a capitalist society, and when companies are forced to produce in the United States, eventually they will be able to get so good at it, the prices will go back down with the competition. And so that's the whole point of it. So if you were going to implement these, this is exactly when you do it. If you're Trump, you don't do it during an election year. You hope the economy, and I think it will recover. And now they're talking about GDP growth, even in the first quarter, when they originally said, no, it's minus 2%. That was the Atlanta Fed saying it was minus 2%. And then the New York Fed comes out and says, no, now the projection is plus 1.5%. That's GDP growth because of all the domestic investment with Trump and what he spurred in. Now the United Arab Emirates has come out and said, we're investing 1.7 trillion. Saudi Arabia says, as long as Trump meets with us, we're going to invest 1 trillion. So you've got a lot of wealthy Middle Eastern countries now investing into the United States. You've got these gold cards. Trump says he's already generated $5 billion. I'm not a fan of the gold cards, but I'm just saying he's able to generate a lot of revenue doing this. And you want to talk about Alberta, adding that province to the United States, we become totally energy independent with all of their resources. And then we'll talk possibly about Saskatchewan as well, but we don't want to take all of Canada. And I don't think Trump wants to take all of Canada either. It wouldn't make sense. And I understand the whole idea and the dynamic between the United States and Canada, and there are a lot of very angry Canadians. I think Canadians have to understand your life. You should be very, very thankful that you live right, I guess, right above the United States, because we understand in a war situation, and you can say, well, it's never going to happen, but if something happened, you would be crying to the United States if Canada somehow got invaded by another country. Now, that would probably be the Russians, maybe coming through Alaska. I mean, based on where Canada is located, this is very hard to invade. But Canada has this kind of weird, like, proxy power to where they're like, well, the United States will just save us, but also we hate the United States. And the sense is that, well, they don't like Trump, they don't like that he's trying to take over their country, but you know that we're responsible for you, right? You realize that you don't have the military to defend the amount of land that you have. And so the United States would have to help whatever. And that's one of the reasons that there's really no threat of any invasion of Canada. And obviously it's also the 21st century, but I'm just saying, in a World War III scenario, if it was easier for the United States just to annex Canada to keep North America safe, Canada would be fully on board 1,000%. And so it's like this double speak to where they're like, well, we can pump out our chests and we don't care about having a small military because the United States will protect us, but also we hate the United States. We would never want to join them. Screw their leader. Okay? It is what it is. But, and look, obviously when we're talking about annexing your country, I understand people are not going to be happy about that. But honestly, it's not about annexing the country. It's about, this would be all diplomatically. It would be through these tariffs hurting Canada. And it's not even just the tariffs. For me, Alberta, it's not even about the tariffs. This is about the Liberals winning over and over and over again. They've got a 20% approval rating, and they're being propped up by all the major Liberal cities and all the immigrants that vote Liberal that come into the cities. And Alberta's pissed off, and they produce so much, and they're forced to give Eastern Canada money to help pay for themselves because of the amount of people that they have and they have to subsidize. So it's a total mess in Canada. Alberta knows it, and they're looking for a safe haven. And they know if they join the United States with how powerful we are, we could give them significant support, and we could allow them, through deregulation, to be an even bigger energy producer. And so that's the overall goal with that. But when it comes to right now their citizens, it's probably around 50-50. But if you did a snap poll right after if Carney wins, I think the majority of the people of Alberta would want to join the United States. That would be my reference on that. And then what happens after that? Does Saskatchewan follow? Does Manitoba follow? You start getting a cluster of provinces that would join the United States, and then it would be all of Eastern Canada against. We don't want Eastern Canada. We don't want their voting blocks at all. We're not interested. And, they've got their plan. They want to double the population, because you look at the population per mile or per square. I mean, it's really, really low in Canada, and there are some uninhabitable areas. I mean, the territories in the north are extremely cold during the winter, but they're talking about, well, we need more people. Well, you're going to destroy your country. You do that. You are going to destroy your country. You're going to destroy any culture that you had if you decide to go that route. And that's why there needs to be fear-mongering from the Conservative Party. That's why I think the Conservative Party will win, and they will, at least to a degree, be able to stymie the crazy immigration that they've seen in Canada. But the Conservative Party is more moderate in an American sense, but it is still more conservative and way more obviously conservative than the Liberal Party, who is just radical, and they're obsessed with immigrants and they're obsessed with population. I think it's going to help the GDP. Remember, they had all the Indian immigrants. They said it was going to be a tech hub. It's been a total disaster. Their GDP has been linear. When you look at it compared to all the other Western countries, it's one of the worst. So this is very interesting. If the Liberal Party wins, look for an immediate reaction from Alberta and the citizens to say, we're done with this. We're sick of it. We can't handle this. The Liberal Party had a 20% approval rating. They won again because of these major cities and all these immigrants voting. This is horrible. We're done. And we are giving money through the Equalization Act to the eastern side of Canada. This is unacceptable. We're going to join the United States. We share more values with the U.S., and they're going to treat us better. And with the universal health care and all that stuff. I mean, listen, there's ways to make it to where they can pay for it themselves. Alberta can, because they can be self-sufficient to a degree, but they only have, 4 or 5 million people, around 5 million people, like 4.9 million. But that's just another 9 electoral votes. That's another, you make just Alberta a state. that's a Republican senator or 2 Republican senators. That's a Republican governor, and it's 8 or 9 electoral votes for the Republicans. I mean, that's representatives as well. So this is all conservative people joining, and also Saskatchewan would be more of a swing state, but you could look at it more as conservative. Actually, I think Saskatchewan is more conservative. I think if you take Alberta and Saskatchewan, those are 2 conservative states for the United States, and it's not gerrymandering. We're not redrawing it. They're seceding because they hate what's going on in Canada because of how liberal and the WEF infestation that's taken over their government, and they want to join the United States to find a country that they share common values with. They've tried it with Canada. I mean, this is like however many years now, like the 4th straight time the Liberals would win, and it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. It got so bad they had to force Trudeau out, even though Trudeau's like the liberal god, or at least he was back in 2018, 2019 to the Canadians. They're like, this dude's even so bad, he's like a 20% approval rating, but we're going to vote for them anyways. This is why these conservative provinces want to leave Canada. Now, it depends on what happens with the election, I would say. And look, the tariffs also have an impact. There's no doubt about it. But I think this election is even more so because the tariffs, we don't exactly know what Trump's going to do. He's very wishy-washy. He puts the tariffs on, he takes them away, he tries to do different negotiations. My guess is, and it's hard to really guess with Trump, because if he decides to keep them on long term, inevitably they will have a positive impact. It just depends how, what's the return on investment. Does it happen within Trump's 4 years? I think it will, but the thought is it would kick up domestic production and it would allow us to be more self-sufficient, and it would eventually create prices that would be lower to where we're not constantly trading with Canada. But honestly, I don't mind trading with Canada. The dynamic with Canada is very, very positive for the United States when it comes to trade. They give us a very good deal because they know they have to, because they have to keep it. They have to be very nice to us because of how strong we are. And so you could say, well, they should just give us stuff. Okay, well, then you're going to have to be a lot more aggressive. That might be what Trump wants. But I don't really have any problems with trade with Canada. And Trump also talks about the tariff issue, things like that, because of the dairy. And they say it's to protect their own farmers. But I think if there was a renegotiation of a trade deal, they would have to take all the tariffs off. And I think they know they would, because it would sink their economy if these tariffs stayed on for a long period of time. And again, that might be what Trump wants to do. Is he fully committed to this trade war for a long period of time? That's what it's going to take to bring domestic production back to the United States. Or you would just annex the entire country and then the production would be there automatically. And we'd get unlimited lumber. Trump always talks about lumber. The problem is with lumber is you do have to cut down forests and trees. And the lumber, the building quality is a little bit worse. Now, they do have a lot of lumber in Alaska, but Canada definitely has good wood when it comes to building homes for the United States. So that's why I would want to still trade with Canada when it comes to lumber and it comes to other things that Canada is an excellent. Now, we don't need them. Of course, we don't really need any country based on how big our economy is. But it just makes it easier to continue trade with Canada at this point. But to me, this is the little turbulence that we're going to deal with under Trump. It's just a little bit turbulence. There's turbulence early on. This is when you do it. There's no election. There's nothing like that. You deal with the turbulence. That's why, see, this is what these liberals do. This is a great example. They talk about the egg prices. 2 weeks ago, you would say, Trump is so bad. Look at these egg prices. It's terrible. And the eggs are lower now than when the entire thing started. They started killing all the chickens because of that bird flu. And now the eggs are even lower. And so now what is Trump, this god, because he got the egg prices down? Well, no. It's just when you take a snapshot of an economic time frame that's so short, it's like, well, since Trump came in, the eggs are up 300%. Well, now they're down. And so did Trump save anything? No, it's just, it fluctuates. You can't take a snapshot of an immediate time. It's a longer period. So you've got to wait for the longer period to happen before you really judge the economy. And we saw already really positive things with the economy. You've got inflation down. You have the native-born jobs up, the foreign-born jobs down. Remember, that's what Biden would always tout. He'd say, well, we added more jobs. They're all foreign part-time jobs. It's the worst quality jobs. And then it'd also be people getting 2 or 3 jobs because of how bad inflation was, and they try and tout those as new jobs created. Think about that. But this situation right here, this is something we're going to have to watch when it comes to Alberta. Depending on what happens with the election, these people that are putting up billboards are not happy. It's about 40% they want to leave right now. It's probably going to go up significantly more if the Liberal Party and Mark Carney end up winning in that election. And we're thinking the election is April 20th. I'm not sure if it's confirmed or not. it's probably April or May. It's going to be coming up pretty soon in Canada. And so we'll be watching that and we'll see the immediate reaction depending on who wins. I do also think there could be a scenario where the Conservative comes in first, but the second and third places are Democrat liberal parties, to where they end up outnumbering the Conservatives in the government there, which would be a problem as well. But either way, guys, this is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.